You're listening to Affected by Altitude, a Colorado Rockies podcast for and by Rockies fans on Rocky Mountain Rooftop. Thank you for joining us as we discuss all things baseball and Colorado Rockies. Hello and welcome to Affected by Altitude, a Colorado Rockies podcast on Rocky Mountain Rooftop, proud affiliate of the Fans First Sports Network. I'm your host, Evan Lang, and with me, a special guest. It's Patrick Lyons of Just Baseball and Rockies Insider. Skylar, unfortunately, under the weather for this episode, and Patrick very kindly is joining us today. Patrick, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Evan. I feel like this is a World Baseball Classic scenario. I'm a starting pitcher that can go deep into games, but you need me out of the bullpen with Skylar unavailable. I'm here for you.
I'm so excited for the World Baseball Classic in 2026. Like all the stuff that we've heard so far, all the coaches so far, all the players so far. Word is that Venezuela would very much like Ezequiel Tovar on their roster, which is exciting.
Yeah, I'm excited. I can't wait for it. It's I on the plane ride to Orlando, I look back on some old notes and some photographs from the 2022 winter meetings, and there was on the bulletin board World Baseball Classic Media Day, and I go, oh my gosh, World Baseball Classic is next spring, so we're going to get a media day while here in Orlando. So that was definitely excited to be a part of that, and a lot larger crowd, a lot more media were anticipating that event than 3 years ago.
Yeah, I think the World Baseball Classic's always been awesome in my opinion, but I really do think the 2023 Classic kind of put it on the map, especially for the American audience, because you had such the big swingers and the like. It really was for a lot of Team USA the best against, Shohei Ohtani and Team Japan. But then you also had a bunch of other really fun teams. Like Team Mexico was a blast during that World Baseball Classic.
Yeah, it really was. Yeah, I think you saw a lot better talent representing the world teams, right? Versus the typical powerhouses of Japan, Dominican Republic, and of course, the United States. But there was a lot more than just that. And then, of course, the ninth inning, the final out, like you couldn't have scripted. If it was in a book, you'd throw this book to the side and go, I've wasted countless hours reading this book to get to the ending where these two teammates are going against one another, and this two-way pitcher DH is pitching against his teammate. Like it's not going to happen. Like there's no way. And yet we actually got that. It was insane.
Yeah, it was incredible. I'm so excited for the next one. Really quick, we're going to do the quick Colorado sports rundown, as has become a little bit of a tradition over the last month or so. We'll start with the unfortunate one. The Denver Broncos, unfortunately humbled by the Jacksonville Jaguars this afternoon. Final score 34-20. Just the Jags are red hot, and they came in and they punched the Broncos in the mouth. We're wishing the best for wide receiver Pat Bryant, who ended up hospitalized after the game on a pretty rough hit. So that's rough. The Broncos are still in good position to potentially earn the first seed in the AFC, but they're going to need to turn things around for the last two games of the season. Colorado Avalanche, at time of recording, currently up on the Minnesota Wild. Avs are still just absolutely in business. Marty Necas looking great. Nate McKinnon looking great. Nuggets continuing to stumble a little bit. They're not the worst. Like, they're fine, but they could definitely be playing better. Hopefully Christian Brown and Aaron Gordon will be back. Most recently, they lost a game to the pretty good this year Houston Rockets on Dan Issel night at Ball Arena. So unfortunate, but hey, at least the Avs are still trucking along, and they're a blast to watch.
Even though it's still the regular season, this does feel like one of the better times in Denver sports. Of course, you've got the three teams playing and playing well, whereas the Rockies are still the worst team in Major League Baseball. But as we'll talk about today, as this is Affected by Altitude, a Rockies podcast, that things are actually better. So you go, you know what? I can feel better about that wobbly fourth leg because it's not totally deteriorating, and it's maybe I can salvage the fourth leg of this table because things are obviously going great for the Broncos and Avs right now. And, with the playoffs right around the corner, perhaps it can get even better.
Yeah, we're trying to fix that leg. It's not it's a work in progress, but it doesn't have to be cut off just yet.
Yeah, very true. And with the Broncos playing on Christmas against the Chiefs, you go, oh, okay, that could be a nice little present too. Just a couple weeks before the start of the NFL postseason. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think overall it's probably a good time. I think in Denver sports.
Yeah, oof, the poor Chiefs. Like, I hate the Kansas City Chiefs, but this is never how you want somebody's season to end, where Mahomes tore his ACL. Their backup QB, Gardner Minshew, is believed to have torn his ACL today. So they are down to their third string quarterback, Chris Olatakun. Uh, it's a rough time for Chiefs fans right now, and I do empathize with that.
It's not Elvis Gerbach. He's not, or Dave Craig. No,
They
it's not
might
the
need to
third
get
string.
one of them back at this point. I mean, Philip Rivers is back in the league.
True. And and to add insult to injury, it sounds like Kansas City is going to lose. Kansas City, they're going to move across state lines to the state of Kansas, which is just wild to think about. So yeah, times are hard, but you know what? You can only go to every single Super Bowl so often. So it's bound to catch up with you, and it definitely is right now for KC fans.
Yeah, for sure. But like Patrick said, this is a Colorado Rockies podcast, and we are here to talk about the Colorado Rockies. And Patrick, most recently, you were boots on the ground at the winter meetings in beautiful Orlando, Florida, where the Rockies didn't make any big roster moves, but instead, what they have been doing is filling up their coaching staff and filling up their front office. And they have made so many moves in that regard over the last few weeks and during the winter meetings. Really, it seems like they are mostly done. There are a few front office positions you could probably fill. There's a handful of strategy roles left, and there's of course minor league coaching staff and some additional big league coaching staff hires. But most of the names have fallen into place at this point. And who I really wanted to get your perspective on was someone who was hired during the winter meetings is Alon Leishman, the new pitching coach for the Rockies, who is going to spearhead an entirely new group of pitching strategy and development coaching for the Rockies.
Yeah, he was a real interesting hire for Colorado, and that was the start of them basically just shedding their previous ways of business of going outside the organization. As much as you said, it seems like they're done with the front office and coaching staff in general. They every couple days they find a new person from outside the organization to bring in versus promote or give a raise, from within the organization. And Alon Leishman has been certainly one of the most interesting ones as one of the bright spots for that Marlins pitching staff that was fairly solid last year and started doing some things outside the box. And just his background in general, being born in Israel and playing on uh, in what was the only baseball field in Israel at one point. So he's entirely self-taught. He knows 3 languages. And so for a guy that uh, on the surface, you say, "Oh, this is a white man." He knows what it's like to be a minority. He knows what it's like to be a non-American or English-speaking American. So he can certainly make a connection to a lot of players in Latin America, where most other people that give off that same appearance as him would not. So I think that definitely bodes well for him, creating a little bit more buy-in than most typical pitching coaches. And because he doesn't have that big league pedigree, he's going to have to pull from that a lot more. Did represent Team Israel in both the Olympics and in the World Baseball Classic too. So certainly a talent. Played some college ball. So he's very innovative, as it were, a very innovative, and that's something that the Rockies need to do right now, just to catch up to the rest of the league, just to pull into 29th place, is start to do things really differently. And I think they've got the right guy for that job.
Yeah, and for Leishman and for everyone else they've brought in, it's been really refreshing. With the overall goal is very clearly, and Paul DePodesta has mentioned it as well, it's getting a wide range of people from around the league, guys who have very little connection to the Colorado Rockies, at if any at all, who are focused on player evaluation, player development, innovation, coaching, physical performance, like just a bunch of different guys with a bunch of different specialties and a bunch of different fields. And I think what's really refreshing with Leishman, but with the rest of the new pitching staff as well, Leishman is only 36. The oldest guy of the bunch that we have hired is only 45. And that's Gabe Rebus, who's going to be the assistant pitching coach. And even then, that's an entirely different thing for the Rockies that we know is when was the last time we had an assistant pitching coach?
I believe he's the first, because it's just traditionally been a pitching coach, and then eventually the bullpen coach was added, and then the assistant pitching coach is like, all right, well, it's a step up from bullpen, right? As front offices and MLB teams continue to create different roles and different jobs so you can hire away from other teams. So I believe this is the first assistant pitching coach that they've had. And as you said, a real young group. And from some of the insiders that I've spoken to, like this isn't just, a bunch of random guys or qualified guys, but these are some real interesting names that the Rockies are bringing in. And, I think it's still going to take plenty of time. And, we're not previewing the 2026 season, but for the Rockies to lose 100 games, it really wouldn't be that surprising. But there's an infrastructure there for them to really start this rebuild, and it's a shame because typically when you start a rebuild, it feels like you start to take some notable steps forward, and they might a little bit in 2026. But when you lose 100 games, which again they are expected to do, it doesn't feel like a big step, but it is because of everything happening behind the scenes. And so it's just going to be, unfortunately, another year of patience for Rockies fans.
Yeah, and I keep trying to temper those expectations because it's been wonderful to see like actual hope among the Rockies fan base of wow, the Rockies are actually, it seems like they're doing the right things, but still having to temper the expectation with the Rockies are still going to be pretty bad next year because you don't get to the point that the Rockies have been over the last 3 seasons, specifically last year, without what was, like I've said, basically a fundamental failure on every level of baseball operations for the team. And now it's a complete rebuilding process, and it's going to take some time. And I think we could be pleasantly surprised by how the Rockies do, but if they lose 100 games again, I don't think it's a sign that nothing's working, nothing we've done is right. Is you're going to have to look for a bunch of little individual things. And when it comes to the way that the Rockies have done things for so long, just the fact that they are changing things up is incredibly refreshing. And I think about this article that it was getting posted around is like the midterm off-season grades from Sports Illustrated, and they gave the Rockies a D minus because they haven't really done any like player transactions yet. But at the same time, that's sort of like a missing the forest for the trees because no, the Rockies haven't really done any major player transactions yet because they've been instead focusing on rebuilding their entire baseball operations from the ground up. I mean, yeah, some of the lifers are still there, but it looks like the overall day-to-day operations, both on the coaching side and in the front office, are all brand new. So you've got DePodesta, who brought in Burns, who brought in Tanis and Levin. And then you've got all the new pitching coaches. You've got the new hitting coach. You've got the new bench coach, all brand new people. And the Rockies are out there, they're quietly making some minor league moves, but it's really the big thing is that right now it appears like they are focusing on what needs to be focused on. It's like big splashy signings aren't really going to do much for the Rockies right now. And of course we want them to make signings, but at the same time, like them going out and spending $40 million on a guy who doesn't want to be here when there's still so much other work to do is not really that important right now. And Patrick, my question for you, because you're among the Rockies delegation at the winter meetings, all the other beat writers, members of the Rockies front office and the Rockies organization, what was the vibe at the winter meetings for the Rockies? Because I feel like this year was so fundamentally different for the team compared to last previous winter meetings.
The vibes were good. They weren't great. They were definitely good. And the last few off seasons, they weren't. They weren't bad, but they just certainly were not good. They were just far from it. And I just felt sort of on like a personal level of being able to hold my head high as I walked around the hotel, not like, oh man, the Rockies are doing great stuff. Look at me. I cover this awesome team. But it wasn't like years past where it's the same old. And it's like, man, this is kind of depressing, uh, to fly out and to give your time to this thing when, as it's been the last few years, you almost could cover it from home. Like you can almost just be that, getting your news secondhand and seemingly appear as if you're down there or something. So it definitely was a lot more worth the while. They the communications department were doing a lot more, shuttling people back and forth to different things. There was business going on. That's the big thing, is that sure, they're the Rockies, along with I believe still the Boston Red Sox, are the only two teams that have yet to sign a big league free agent. I don't think that's that important, especially when you consider that the other team is the Boston Red Sox, and they have been improving their roster, just hasn't been through free agents yet, right? So the Rockies have had business this year, whereas in the last couple of years there's been no business. It's been business as usual. So to your point, where you said before about the Rockies have being so bad in just about every single way possible, I think they can lose 105 games this year and essentially feel a lot better about it, because maybe they improve in a couple important areas, like finding they've got some true superstars. That's one of those areas that they need to fix. And sure, maybe signing a notable free agent could allow you to feel like you're checking off that box. But as we know from Chris Bryant, that's not always going to be the case. So perhaps with this new coaching staff and this new ethos, and certainly no longer a sense of complacency throughout the organization, Brent Doyle takes a big step forward. Hunter Goodman really, puts himself out there as being Cal Raleigh 2.0 in a certain way, or even Cal Raleigh before he hit 60 home runs last season, which was still a great player, which was still a superstar player. So if the Rockies can take steps in that direction, and Charlie Condon hits the ground running, right? There's all kinds of numerous outcomes for 2026 that say that can allow you to say, you know what, I'm feeling good about 2027, because regardless of the record, there are some bigger pieces here that fit, that you can feel good about going forward. And even if for Brenton Doyle it's getting back to 2024, well, now you've got that great trade chip with 3 more years of club control, and now you can really get some value back to further along the rebuild.
Yeah, and it's, I hate having to talk about the idea of trading Brenton Doyle because I love Brenton Doyle. He's one of my favorite guys.
Been
But at the
great.
same time, you actually kind of like the idea of the Rockies exploring that option, because you think about the Rockies of the past, and it's just not something they do. Historically, they hold on to guys for far too long. They don't trade them when their value is peak, or they wait and then they get nothing, or if they do trade them too early. And they've always in the past had the fear of, well, if we get rid of this guy and he does better with the other team than he did with us, then it makes us look bad. But you've seen the Rockies make all of these decisions that I feel like they never would have made previously. Cutting bait with Drew Romo and Anthony Molina and Ryan Rollison, former top prospects with the organization that they said goodbye to. And same for, letting other guys walk at this point. They let Herman become a free agent. And, there's a non-zero chance that he comes back. And that's something that I've been thinking about recently, of wanting to see how he would do with this entirely new pitching coaching staff. But to have the Rockies do all that and then at least consider trading Brenton Doyle, or looking at him as, if we can get his value back up, then he's a valuable trade piece, versus, the Rockies should have traded Ryan McMahon 2 seasons ago. The Rockies should have traded Elias Diaz when his value was the highest. The Rockies should have traded all of these different players, or cut bait on different prospects way earlier on, and they just sort of never did it. And I like what you mentioned about, the Rockies are at the winter meetings actually doing business, which, that's even a huge step in the right direction, because I think about the last, 7+ years where the Rockies weren't really a team you could do business with, because they were so weird and so insular and nobody knew what they wanted. I think about there was a great article on Yahoo Sports a couple weeks ago by Jake Mintz, I think his name is. Yeah, Jake Mintz. And he mentions a quote from another front office executive who said every trade deadline is mind boggling to the point it's expected we don't get a reasonable or usable response. We understand that if there's a targetable player on Colorado, we're probably not going to acquire him because the Rockies' logic is singular. And it's like, just having a team that's willing to approach things from a business side of things and do business at the winter meetings, at the deadline, do something, make difficult decisions. Like, that's big. That's a big step in the right direction for this team.
Yeah, the front office is no longer going to operate out of fear and complacency because that is clearly shown that that cannot work anymore. And I forget who it was because I went back and looked and I could have sworn it was Jeff Passan, but I think it was somebody else saying that the trade conversations going into the winter meetings were probably better than they've been in a while. Just tons of conversation, and I couldn't help but think that really did have a lot to do with the Colorado Rockies. You know, I know they're just one team, but that's a whole roster of players that now changes the mathematics. That now says, well, now we got to call on this guy and we got to follow up on this player from this team because you know what, if he's not available, we've got a lot of options. So it makes things certainly a lot more exciting and creates a lot more flexibility when it comes to trades. And we've even seen, you know, a couple of 3-team trades already go down just this past week. So, you know, Colorado, it's great to have them back as part of Major League Baseball and truly being a team that wants to get back to relevancy and wants to run itself like a Major League Baseball team rather than a business, rather than a baseball team that is a part of MLB. But the baseball side of things, you know, that we know the business side is good and it always will be good because the Monfort family is great at business. Denver's a great market as well. Coors Field is a baseball cathedral, but they need to go do the baseball thing a lot better. And the moves that they were able to pull off at the winter meetings and even since then are baseball moves that show that they want to get the baseball part right now, finally, after really, in my opinion, not caring at all about the baseball side of things for the last essentially 4 years since Nolan Arenado trade. That was your decision. You had a frustrated superstar that wanted to win and wanted more support, and you basically decided, yeah, we're not going to do that. We're not going to support you, and in a roundabout way, we kind of don't want to win. I mean, we'd like to. We still think we could win without you and without doing the normal things, but since that point, you just cut the legs out from the entire organization by trading a cornerstone type player. But now they're getting back to basics, and they're definitely going to be on the upswing. It could take a while for for them to be fully back in the air. It's like the plane that's coming down, and the treetops are brushing along the bottom of the plane, and now they're starting to pull back on the yoke just a little bit. Could be a while until they're at 10,000 feet, but it does feel like better days are truly ahead for Colorado.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right because especially in that we've seen it elsewhere. We saw it in the Jake Mintz article on Yahoo Sports of former players, former personnel, former staff members, front office members, all saying similar things: is seats are full, so there's not really an incentive to win. There's not really an incentive to push. And you had this insular front office where it was very clear that Dick Monfort was making the majority of the decisions, with Bill Schmidt, who has been his friend, confidant, and fellow member of the front office for 30 years, and a bunch of other guys who have been there forever. And you look at the huge change now, you've eventually replaced the 2-man front office of Bill Schmidt and Zach Rosenthal with 4 to 5 people. And they've even made moves on the business side of things. They brought in the Cleveland executive to be their chief revenue and strategy officer, and I think there is finally a realization, not just with the Rockies in general, but I think particularly with Walker Monfort, who I feel like, and I haven't spoken to Walker, so who knows? I could be completely off base, but I think there's been a realization from him and maybe even Sterling of, Dad, you want us to inherit this team, and you very clearly love the team because we know Dick Monfort loves the Rockies, but there's really not much for us to inherit right now because the decision making's been so bad. And what's really bad for business is, even though the Rockies are still filling seats, it's always been visiting fans more recently. And a bad baseball team is bad for business But you know what people are willing to pay money for? To go watch a good baseball team. And I think you can even see that when the Rockies host like the best teams in the league, fans come pouring out and they fill it out because they want to see the good, exciting team. So imagine how good it would be for business if your team was the good, exciting team.
Yeah, no, you're right about Walker Monfort. At first, I was skeptical is not the right word, but before we had any moves that were made in the front office, to me, it came across as, or at least it could have been interpreted as, okay, we got to do things differently, and we need the optics to look right. So let's talk about these changes that we're going to make and attribute it to a change at the top in Walker Monfort. And of course, we didn't get any changes for a while because the postseason was going on. So it just was at that point seemingly lip service. But in the weeks and months since the end of the World Series, we now see like no, there really is a commitment, because it wouldn't have been totally surprising, especially when you waited close to 2.5, 3 days to finally make the announcement about Bill Schmidt going away. That is there really going to be this commitment to change? And not look, every team changes in some shape or form each and every offseason, but a notable change, a substantial change to the core infrastructure of the front office and coaching staff. And we didn't get that for a while, and that's fine. But that's where I think there are a lot of Rockies fans and myself that were skeptical. Like, I don't know, this could just be a shell game, right, going on. But it has not been that. It has not
Yeah.
been that at all. And it does truly appear that the work that Walker Monfort has been doing at the top of the front office, top of the food chain, definitely is paying off. And Dick is allowing those other voices to get in there and really bring about a notable change, which is great.
Yeah. And I think where it particularly felt that way that you were mentioning, especially with being skeptical, is the Rockies were after they took so long to announce that Bill Schmidt was stepping away. And then after that, they were saying all of the right things. We're going to look outside the organization. We want to modernize. We want to do all the stuff that you want us to do. But they've done that before. The
Yes,
Rockies have been
precisely.
very good at saying what we want to hear and then not doing it. And I think it especially felt bad where during the whole president of baseball operations search with Emil Sade and Matt Foreman, of it feeling after that whole thing fell apart, it feeling so much like this is the Rockies back to their old shenanigans, ownership meddling, not getting in the way of things. And then I think a lot of people were pretty down on the Paul DePodesta hire at first, myself included. I was very skeptical of that hire. And I say all the time, I love being proven wrong, because so far he's approached everything exactly the way I would want him to, shoring up his weaknesses from being outside of the league by bringing in a guy like Josh Burns, getting lots of different people who he's worked with in lots of different fields with lots of different experience to modernize the Rockies front office. And now, with everything that we have gone through, it does truly feel like the Rockies are walking the walk instead of just talking the talk. And it is very refreshing. And the big thing is just they've got to keep doing it. They can't let Dick Monfort get discouraged after one season. Like, if next season is bad, which is probably going to be, go, oh, I tried all the things that everyone told me to try and they didn't work. So we're going back to doing things my way. Can't let that happen.
I sort of wonder, I hadn't thought of this until now. Now that this has played out as long as it has, and we sort of know, not the end, because we're by no means at the end, but the end of of following through on that promise, or that guarantee of, hey, no, there's really going to be a change. But when hearing you talk about it made me think that perhaps that was maybe the straw that broke the camel's back. Maybe that was a turning point of having Sade and Foreman essentially both reject the Rockies. That, see, Dad, we can't continue to do things the same way of trying to appear as if we are serious while not actually being serious and backing it up, just saying the right things. Because it was, maybe it was very clear to those two candidates for GM that it was a lot of talk and it wasn't going to be a ton of follow through. And that was, okay, let me throw my hands up. this is becoming bad. This could even be embarrassing. We need to do things really differently. And let's whatever you want to do, Walker. I don't know. I don't know if that's true or not, but you could certainly see something like that happening. And you know, you could dissect it like the Zapruder film if you wanted to, the press conference with announcing Paul DePodesta, but Dick was very hands off. I mean, he was still on the podium, so he was still there saying, "Hey, don't forget about me yet." But he was very much, off to the side. Didn't notice any, grimacing or any kind of grumpy look on his face. He looked how he normally looks. But it is curious to think, he didn't really have much to say at that, because maybe he did realize and does realize that my time is pretty much up. But if I do want to hand this team off to my sons, it needs to be in good shape, and it's not in good shape right now. So you know what? Let's go ahead and let one of them take over now, and try to salvage this thing.
He was absolutely going to town on that piece of gum, though. Like that, it was so distracting during that press conference. If he was going hog wild on this piece of gum that he was chewing, but I hadn't actually really thought of it that way. Of the Matt Foreman and Emil Sade, of them dropping out, of essentially it being a wake up call, because now that you think about it, we had mentioned it, we've talked about it. It's been all over the internet of PBO and GM jobs are incredibly coveted positions. There are only 30 of them in all of Major League Baseball. And people said all over the internet, it's like a lot of really smart, talented people are going to view the Rockies open position as one of value, because it's such an interesting challenge. It's something that they can go and try and fix. And if they fix it, they're the ones who fix the Rockies. And that makes it valuable. And to have these two candidates who are basically considered two very good candidates for the position, who had been interviewed for other jobs, to make it to the final, basically the final round, and then go, no, you're not rejecting us, we're rejecting you. I think that definitely could have been a wake-up call, because we talked about all the different wake-up calls throughout the season of, Dick Monfort, like a lot of people, prideful man, and he got embarrassed during the season. Like, the Rockies were a national embarrassment, and that caused, I think, some of the reactions that happened throughout this season. The firing of Bud Black, Hensley Mullins, and Mike Redmond, the eventual departure of Bill Schmidt. And I think it says a lot about Dick Monfort that, like, let's all be honest. We know that Bill Schmidt was essentially said, hey man, we want to let you save face. So if you say you're stepping down / retiring, then that's what we're going to do. But I definitely think now it could have been a final, like, insult to injury wake up call of having your two finalists go, you know what, we're out. This position actually kind of sucks. And leading to what has happened now. And I think about how often in other, back when there used to be more press conferences, because the Rockies haven't done a lot of press conferences and being open with the media since the Nolan Arenado trade, is it was generally Dick at the wheel. And he, like you said, he was there. He chimed in on occasion, but it was Paul DePodesta and Walker Monfort running the show.
It's funny you say that about the press conference, and I talked about this on the Rockies Insider podcast, of like some of the best moments in the last like 5 years in that room in particular, and only one was a press conference. One was a post game presser where Bud Black had overtaken Clint Hurdle for most wins, and when Buddy came out, he was covered in shaving cream and got the beer bath and everything. And so that was just a cool moment, for him to have that and to be there for that, which was great. But really, the only press conference was Kyle Freeland's extension before the 2022 season. That's the only press conference besides the Charlie Blackmon retirement. Like, that's it. Like, those two, and those are really big ones, and certainly much more, I don't want to say momentous occasions, but much more of a celebration. Not to say that people shouldn't be celebrating Paul DePodesta, but it was sort of just a different vibe of like, okay, this is the start of a new era. There's some trepidation. There's still some excitement there, but there's a lot of mixed feelings in general. Whereas with Charlie, it was good. It was fun. It was emotional, and the same thing for Kyle Freeland when okay, you still had 3 consecutive losing seasons in a row. You did just trade away Nolan Arenado, or actually you traded him away before that. But anyway, it just felt like, okay, this is cool. The Denver kid who's going to stay in Colorado and potentially finish his career out there and really build something. Now that there's Chris Bryant around, maybe they will be able to actually do something. They didn't. So yeah, that the DePodesta presser definitely was, the start of better days ahead, and the days definitely seem to be a little bit more exciting. And writing for Purple Row and doing this podcast each and every week, there's finally a little meat on the bones. Like there's some good things that you can talk about and ponder on and dream of like, hey, what could happen with this, and where could this go if things start going right? And it's definitely a lot more, much more of a positive off season as a whole.
Yeah, Skylar and I have talked about in previous episodes. Normally, by this point in the off season, we are grasping at straws for things to talk about. Of we do our postseason award show or other stuff, or maybe episodes are shorter, or we can't necessarily do it on a weekly basis because there's just nothing to discuss. But this offseason has been totally different in that every week there's a lot of new information to digest and discuss. And it's slowed down a little bit now that the winter meetings are over and, it's just about Christmas, end of the year, and stuff will pick back up after January starts. But just the ability to continue to have these conversations, and something that I'm really curious to know your perspective on while you were at the winter meetings, is just the overall openness and availability of the Rockies right now to actually be out there and talking to people. Because for so long, we've had a team that they don't do press conferences. They don't really talk to the media. They don't really tell us what's going on, and we're left in the dark. But at the winter meetings, you had press conferences from DePodesta, from Burns, from uh, Warren Schaefer, who got named the full-time manager. And I'm really curious to know what your thoughts are, because you tend to be a lot more boots on the ground than we do, in terms of going to the games, being at these press conferences, being at the winter meetings. So I really want to know what your perspective is on uh, how the Rockies' approach to talking to the media is changing and evolving.
Yeah, there definitely was a lot more of those conversations going on this offseason, and they were more substantial too. Again, not to beat a dead horse, but Bill Schmidt, there wasn't a ton of substance in some of the things that he would share, and the questions that were lobbed, his way were not substantial too. So you'd always have Dan O'Dowd there on the dais on baseball on MLB Network, right? Because all right, he's got the Colorado connection and feel comfortable, and there wouldn't be again a lot of meat on the bones. It just wasn't substantial, but there's a lot more to like about that. And there's even just from hearing Steve Phillips and Eduardo Perez joking with Warren Schaefer about how much he benches and oh, did you get a lift in today, and having that fun back and forth, and it being like, okay, it's not the same old, or joking with Bud Black about his playing days or his heyday when the Rockies were going to the postseason 2017, 2018. It was like, okay, here's what's happening now. Certainly not a baseball related question when talking about how much you bench, but in general, the vibes were just better. Going back to what you had asked earlier, again, a lot more availability. Schaefer walking around, DePodesta walking around, Josh Burns. There were a couple of people, a lot of college graduates. It's amazing. I'm always surprised there isn't more people that show up to the hotel that hosts the MLB winter meetings, because for an event that you need credentials to get into certain rooms, anything that's not a room, you can just walk around and you can just go and hang out. And there's not a ton of people there that are trying to get autographs and do those kind of things. A lot of young college age students or graduates or people even looking to change professions going and interviewing on the minor league side of things, some on the major league side of things. And I ran into a couple of folks that were interviewing for various analytics and other positions in the Rockies front office. So it was interesting to see that, because that's certainly something that I had never encountered before since I started going to winter meetings back in 2018 when it was first held in Las Vegas there. So overall, again, like I said, there was business to be conducted by the Rockies and the Rockies media in a much different way. And it wasn't, it would have been nice for it to be a couple of free agent signings or what have you, but I find it really interesting that the Rockies are waiting to make their moves because they should have been doing that all along. In the past, like last offseason in particular, it's let's get Tyra Stroud out of the way, Kyle Farmer, and Jacob Stallings extension out of the way, and now we're done pretty much for the entire winter. And maybe even paying a premium to bring those guys in and get those deals done now. Whereas with this new regime, I think the Rockies are wise to sit around and wait for the markets to come to them because they've got various holes. I mean, you could say pretty much everywhere on the diamond, they've got a hole, other than catcher, which even still, you've got your questions about if Goodman can actually stick there defensively. So if they can wait for the market to come to them, they can get a discount. They can, bring in certain players that maybe aren't going to feel as invested in keeping around for 2027. So you can trade them at the trade deadline. So there's a lot more potential and possibility for the Rockies going forward because it does really appear that they are going to do business differently than they have in the past, and that's going to be nothing but a positive.
Yeah, and it's not even just the free agents of waiting to see how the market changes. It's waiting to see who signs with other teams so that if another team reached out, or the Rockies could even be proactive and say, hey, we notice you didn't get that free agent at the position you wanted. Well, we have a guy. And I think that's going to be really interesting because like you said, the Rockies don't need to be going out and making big splashy moves. And it was always really frustrating when, like, at the beginning of the winter meetings, they get their small handful of moves out of the way, and then it's nothing until spring training. And then maybe they do some weird stuff at spring training, like trading Nolan Jones or bringing in Mickey Moniak or whatever. But generally, it's just a whole bunch of nothing for weeks and months until we hit Arizona for Cactus League action. But at the same time, I also like what you're saying of the fact that people are going to the winter meetings and interviewing for analytics positions in the Rockies organization is another sign that the Rockies are doing what they said to do, and that is modernizing and embracing analytics. Because I betcha Paul DePodesta and Josh Burns are going to want to exponentially grow that analytics and player data team that has been one of the smallest in baseball for many years at this point.
Yeah, I'm curious about how much these new front office additions are getting paid. And to be honest, I can't necessarily even compare that to what a league average is. But in general, my curiosity is just how much have they invested in the front office and in the coaching staff in a way in which they haven't in the past, right? I think, Dick Monfort, we know, for anyone listening to this podcast, you're a Rockies fan, so you know that Dick Monfort isn't cheap. He's just not great at spending his money in the right areas. When you can spend a lot on your payroll, but for what, 10% of what you pay on your payroll, if you invested that into minor league development and analytics, you can have just as equally as good of a team. No one really wants the Rockies to become the Tampa Bay Rays, where you don't know who's going to be on the roster each and every year. They're going to be good. They're going to find some diamonds in the rough. But maybe they can shift that way of, hey, let's take some of this money that we would spend in payroll, and yeah, maybe the Rockies do dip down and not really reinvest or bring their opening day payroll up to what it was at the beginning of last year. But even if you take a quarter of that money, that's a good $5 million that you are investing in the analytics department or the front office to then get more out of that roster, get more out of your moves and plenty of things behind the scenes that are going to make a really big difference. And if Colorado, does that some more, assuming that they are doing that right now, then again, you can have your cake and eat it too, and spend not aggressively, but at least be in the middle table, right? In and around number 15. But you're getting a lot more bang for your buck, and you're developing players at a much more successful rate. You're finding more diamonds in the rough. You're conducting more Herman Marquez type trades before they get to the majors and fleecing a team like the Rays, who nobody does. And the Rockies were able to do that at one point. So I think if, again, they are truly in making those investments financially, in a lot of the behind the scenes areas, I think that's going to have a much better payoff and bode really well for them going forward in this rebuild.
Yeah. And on the flip side of it is by investing those resources, improving your player development, improving resources on the back end that are available to both your staff and your players, that's going to make the Rockies a more appealing team for people to want to come and sign here. Where it's been talked about at length, the Rockies have not been an appealing destination for free agents. The free agents that do come here are either reclamation projects or we have to overpay to get them to be willing to come here. And if we actually prove that we're an organization that we can help a player get the most out of his tools, improve his tools, be the best player he possibly can be, then we're not always going to have to break the bank to get someone to sign here or have to just rely on, players from the bargain bin that nobody else is willing to sign. And I think what's going to be really huge, in addition to, we already discussed the fact that there's an assistant pitching coach, which already shows that they're putting more resources into the coaching staff than they have previously. But I think what's going to be really interesting to watch is the development of the coaching staffs of the minor league affiliates moving forward, because it's been talked about. Jack Corrigan talked about it on the Dan Patrick Show many months ago, that the Rockies haven't been the best at allocating resources on the player development side in minor league baseball. They're operating with the minimum number of coaches, whereas other teams have more than just 3 coaches. Other teams have more than just manager, hitting coach, pitching coach. There's assistant coaches, there's alternate coaches, there's all sorts of stuff. And I would really like to see them bring in additional coaches, shake things up in the minor league system. I'm not saying necessarily like fire all the managers and do all of this, but they already parted ways with the pitching coach for the Albuquerque Isotopes, and they haven't made any hires yet. But I think they need to bring in multiple pitching coaches for that. I think a team that struggles offensively sometimes, like the Spokane Indians, who have been great pitching wise, but in the Pacific Northwest with the Marine Layer, they struggle with hitting, and they particularly really struggled in terms of, not getting on base and not drawing a lot of walks. Let's get some additional hitting coaches in there. Just really expand the resources that everyone has available at every level. And so you've already shown, at least to start, that you're willing to do that at the big league level. You're going to have a hitting coach. You're potentially going to have multiple assistant hitting coaches under him. Rumor is it's probably going to be Nick Wilson and Jordan Pacheco. And then you've already got an assistant pitching coach. They're bringing in other coordinators. Frankly, I'd like them to see them bring in even more pitching strategy and pitching coordinator front office positions. But it really is just, I think about, like you said, the Rockies could spend a fraction of what they do on their payroll. Like the $27 million that Chris Bryant is due in 2026 could be a lot of resources to invest into player growth and player development. And it's time for the Rockies to finally become what they've always said they are. They've always said, oh, we're a draft and develop team. But then they draft these players and they can't develop them. They can't get the best out of them. And they either never make it to the big leagues or they are never really able to deliver on their potential. And that's been especially evident in the post Nolan Arenado and post Trevor Story days, where they are just not developing these superstar players that they used to be able to do. I mean, I look at the fact that Todd Helton retired over a decade ago, and we still don't have a franchise first baseman or even a guy who's managed to hold down the position for multiple seasons. And that's a failure of the Rockies organization, but it's a failure that you can now work on correcting. And if you really view Charlie Condon as the first baseman of the future, which he absolutely could be, then you need to invest as much as possible into making sure that you don't screw up his development and end up with another Michael Tolia.
Yeah, they need to spend smarter, not harder, which I think at least half translates there. But you're right; they need to spend better on the coaching staff. Like you said, Albuquerque pitching coaches. You know what Albuquerque is very similar to? Pitching at altitude in Denver. So could you perhaps crack, the code there in Albuquerque just a little bit in the Pacific Coast League and learn some things? Again, maybe not find a solution, but find things that work better. in Albuquerque and in the PCL in general, you could with a better investment. Spokane, okay, struggle with the offense. You know what that sounds a lot like? Colorado goes on the road and struggles with their offense. So like, investing in that certainly could be good. And a lot of teams will, and Major League Baseball as a whole will go about saying, okay, here's the money that's going to be allotted for this department or whatever. And it's interesting that the new chief revenue and strategy officer, maybe Nikki Schmidt, maybe she's able to do some things to change how the money is spent. And if you say, all right, well, if we spend all this money on coaches and on the development side, then we're not as interested in spending all of our bonus pool money in the draft. And let's say the Rockies try to get everybody at a haircut and they don't actually spend all their money because of this, fictitious, so to speak, pool of money that I'm saying that they've got allotted, and we're gonna take from our bonus pool money essentially to then go ahead and hire better coaches. Okay, that's fine, because even if you don't spend all of your draft money, you know what you can do? Turn around, make more trades for your veteran big league assets, bring in more prospects that somebody else already just paid serious signing bonuses to. Now you don't have to worry about that. And then you can develop those players because you didn't have to spend that signing bonus that you didn't want to spend in the first place. You didn't have to, and you still got that really great talent and you coached them up. So these are all different strategies that I'm sure have probably been discussed in and around Coors Field within the last 15 years. I don't know if they've been discussed in the last 5 years under Bill Schmidt, but I can almost certainly guarantee you that these are some of the things that Paul DePodesta is trying to figure out and do Moneyball in 2026 in a different way of finding out where the market is, certainly can be taken advantage of in a positive way, or what's not being valued quite enough. He's going to figure that out. It's going to take some time too. That's the other piece. It really will take some time, but I think they've got some of the right people in place right now.
Yeah. And goodness knows if you can figure out winning in Albuquerque, those poor fans would be very grateful because it's been a rough few seasons for them down at the lab in beautiful Albuquerque, New Mexico, where the Topes have just been bad. And a lot of that is because the Rockies player development, especially when it comes to pitching, just falters once guys get up to AAA.
And the offenses haven't been that otherworldly, right? Like they're good PCL offenses, but they're not, again, fantastic. And careful what you wish for, Evan, because you don't want Albuquerque to get so good, and then all of a sudden you're going to start hearing, "Hey, you know what? Maybe Albuquerque can get a Major League Baseball team," and then all of a sudden, I don't know, maybe the Wichita Wind Surge become the AAA affiliate somehow. They'll have to figure that out down the road, but
They could
yeah,
just
the
give me
people of
back my
Albuquerque,
Sky Sox.
yeah, yeah, Albuquerque deserves a winner. It's pretty much been long overdue. And I think Pedro Lopez is a really good manager too down there. I've heard nothing but great things. But in general, it'd be nice to see them win a little bit more. And with some of the big league talent, which we haven't seen a ton of big league talent going to AAA, signing those minor league deals. John Brebbia, Nicky Lopez. There was another one on Sunday. Vima, v, Vimael Machin, I believe an infielder,
It is
is
pronounced
now
machine, which
Machin.
is
Yeah,
so apparently I know a guy who lives out in the Norfolk area. He was with the AAA Norfolk Tides for most of last year.
he
Apparently
had a
the
good year.
fans went wild for this guy, but mostly because it's just they had a good time saying the name. Not that he was particularly great. Like he's been a fine minor league player and he's a solid enough defender, but he's not a big league player.
So we've got the Veen Machine and Vimael Machin.
And there's another guy where if the Rockies want to make him work, you've got to invest enough resources. That's Zach Veen.
Yeah. Yeah, certainly. There's so many other coaches. I remember a few years ago when the Red Sox came through. This might have even been 2021, maybe 2022. And they had all kinds of coaches taking up lockers where there was like a massage therapist. There was the mental strength coach. Like, and again, these were like the specific roles. And the Rockies do have some of those sort of auxiliary coaches that do work, with the team, but sometimes they have other jobs in addition to those auxiliary roles. So again, those are the same, similar kind of investments in trying to get this thing back on track, trying to create a new culture, which, this is going to be a new culture, right? It's not a culture of winning yet, but they've done their best to say, okay, we need to try to get rid of that culture of losing. And it's still going to haunt them. There's still going to be those ghosts in the clubhouse. But a good month in April, I think, will do wonders for kind of helping the start of that new culture. Even if the wheels fall off in the second half of the season or after the trade deadline, depending on who they deal, a really good April, I think, could fix a lot of that. Because I tell you, by the third week in April this past year, the season was already over, and it felt like the beginning of August, where you go, all right, trade deadline's passed. I don't know what the final 7 weeks are going to be for, because there's nothing to play for, and we were 3 weeks into the season. So a better start to April, I think, will do wonders for that clubhouse culture.
Yeah, and the culture is so important. Like, you saw it a bit with Warren Schaefer, especially at the end of the season, where guys are back to having fun. But we've interviewed so many of these minor leaguers, these prospects who are used to winning in the lower levels of the Rockies farm system and in college and in high school. And they all say the same thing of, we want to bring a winning culture to Denver, Colorado. And now it's time for the Rockies organization to meet them there and have the goal of doing the same.
Yeah, no, that's incredibly well put. And I think, Warren Schaefer wants that. Paul DePodesta wants that. Josh Burns wants that. And I think Walker Monfort wants that. And I think there are enough voices with a lot of weight behind them that this thing could legitimately get good, or be good and be okay. Because that, again, was part of the mathematics, if you will, of, hey, how can they say the right things but not do the right things, right? How can they dance between the raindrops again, as they've been for so long? And there's certainly no way that if they have a president of baseball operations, that's got to be a general manager from within the organization. Or, if they bring in a GM, they won't, that GM won't hire an assistant general manager, because you don't want to get, outnumbered in your own, board, on your own board, in those meetings, right? If you're Dick Monfort. But I guess he's okay with that now, because it doesn't mean he might not step in, and might not make, some people frustrated by saying, no, this is, the buck stops with me, because it does. But there are going to be so many loud voices there that will have a say, and that will have an informed say, that I think it'll be that much harder for an owner, a businessman, to inject himself into a baseball conversation that he has no business in being in.
Yeah, it's always been one of those things where I don't think Dick Monfort is a bad person. I don't think
No.
he's the worst businessman in the world, but I think he knows much less than he thinks he knows about baseball. And that's always been the problem of him injecting himself and overriding people and saying, well, I know what's best and I'm going to do this. And so I'm really curious to see, because I think ultimately the goal for Paul DePodesta and Walker Monfort is to prove that Dick Monfort can release the reins, that if you release your grip, we can make the Rockies a winning organization, and you're going to be happier and you're going to make more money, and the fans are probably going to hate you just a little bit less. Because that's the thing.
Yeah. No.
Having met Dick Monfort, even just a handful of times, is, you can tell that he does not like being disliked. Like, he tries to mingle. He used to always go out and sit in his seats out there at Coors Field and walk around and mingle and make himself visible. And you've seen less and less of that over the years. And you can tell he doesn't really care for this whole everybody hates me kind of thing. And
Yeah, he hasn't sat in his seats since the middle of 2022. Because when I spoke with him at the Friends of Baseball event up in Greeley in winter of the early winter, or pre-spring training of 2023, he said, "Yeah, I was embarrassed. I was embarrassed," and he didn't go back to his seats and during that, in the final 2 months of the 2022 season. And with how things have gone the last 3 years, he certainly hasn't made that appearance back down in his seats behind the Rockies dugout. So, I mean, we're going on 3.5+ seasons that he hasn't been in and about the fans, which, he loves being, and he should be. I don't know how to qualify this exactly, but for someone who was a part of bringing Major League Baseball to Denver and has done a great job on the business side of things and has kept Coors Field up to shape, he should get some love from the fans. It's what he's doing on the baseball side of things. Like you were saying, great at business, not so much at baseball. He's a businessman, not a baseball man. And maybe by hiring some baseball men or baseball people, that could allow him to come back into the fold. And I don't even think it necessarily is going to take a 500 record. I think it could just be an exciting team. I mean, winning 70 games is not that far from 81 wins, which is 500. And when you're at 500, you're not that far away from the postseason. So 70, 71 wins, maybe you see Dick Monfort summer of 2027. That's when he comes out, and maybe he sees his shadow, and that means the Rockies will make the postseason in 2 years. I think that's how it works with owners, shadows, and holes.
Ask me again in February. We'll get the crackdown on that.
Yeah.
Uh,
There's Punxsutawney Phil, and there's Denver Dinger. Why are the Rockies missing an opportunity for Denver to poke his head out, or a Dinger to poke his head out of the dugout and do a whole, how many more weeks of spring are we going to have?
I mean, the answer
Not
is
for him.
probably yes. The Rockies they've needed to do so much more with public engagement and all sorts of other, like their social media presence, all that stuff for a couple of years now. And that's something I'm sort of hoping that we'll see with Nagy Schmidt coming in, is a revitalization of public outreach, of social media, of all that stuff. But we'll wait and see. But Patrick, my last real question for you as we start to close things out. So you were there for the winter meetings. What was your favorite part of the winter meetings?
Oh, that's a good question. There were two things. One was the general camaraderie, getting to hang out as I get to do in the press box with Thomas Harding and Patrick Saunders and my buddy Kevin Henry from the Gazette. Also the DNVR guys, Spencer and Christian. We had a good time palling around and going over to downtown Disney, which is now called, I already forget, Disney Springs. That's what they call the area where you walk around and you can buy M&Ms for $2 an ounce, just crazy stuff like that. But that was really fun. And then also getting a chance to talk with Barry Larkin, Hall of Famer Barry Larkin, who was there representing the Orlando Dreamers, who I think anyone who hears the name Orlando Dreamers and thinks about Major League Baseball in Orlando, you go, no chance. It's an impossibility. We already know there's going to be one on the West Coast, one on the East Coast. The team on the East Coast, very, very likely going to end up being Nashville. And if not Nashville, hey, why not Montreal? And if not Montreal, why not Charlotte? But there's no way Orlando. And yet, sitting down and talking with Barry Larkin, I came away going, maybe. I still don't think it's going to happen, but it was a very compelling case. And the one word he said, I think that was the most important, was the word relocation, because he didn't say we think Orlando should get an expansion team. He said or relocation, and pointed out how much better Orlando is as a big league city than Las Vegas, who's going to have a big league team in the A's. So Orlando gets twice as many visitors coming through, and the other half, the other 40 million extra that they get essentially than Las Vegas are children. That's a lot better for the future in the game of baseball than the money that's going to come into MLB through Vegas and through adults. Nothing wrong with that, but if you want to grow the game through young people, Orlando could be that really great spot. So I thought that was just fascinating talking with him, and anytime you get a chance to talk to a Hall of Famer, I'll find an excuse to talk with a Hall of Famer. But he was there a little bit on business, and considering that 2 years ago, I did not see a Nashville contingency. There wasn't much of a conversation about Nashville being this next expansion city, even though they already had a group together. There are plenty of people that I was asking around about in 2023, like, hey, have you talked to anyone from Nashville? This is a great opportunity for them to get out there and say, hey, we're a big league city. Didn't happen, but Orlando, right there in their backyard, the Orlando Dreamers made their presence felt. So that was a lot of fun.
That's awesome. I'm very jealous. I love Barry Larkin.
Yeah, good guy. Good guy. I probably, after I turned the mic off, should have asked him a question about 1995 MVP but it's hard to switch back and forth to the professional journalist and then the fan. Because I also know sometimes the dumb fan question, which is I have all the time, is like, well, you're not going to, what possible answers Barry Larkin going to have to me going, so do you think Dante Bichette should have actually won the MVP? Of course not. He's going to go, no, I should have won the MVP in 1995. He's not going to go, Patrick, you make a fair point because I think the defensive metrics, I think D-War really was, Dante wasn't graded fairly considering they made it to the postseason. Like, he's not going to say that. So why bother even asking it? But you're right. It was great talking with him. He's a Hall of Famer.
It's like asking Jeff Kent if he thinks Todd Helton should have won Hall of Fame MVP in 2000, which he should have, by the way. Congratulations on being in the Hall of Fame, Jeff. It's great.
More importantly,
you should not have been the MVP in the year 2000.
Yep. It's the first Hall of Famer to ever be on Survivor. Fun fact.
Interesting. I did not know that.
Yeah, I stopped watching Survivor many, many years ago. This is the point in the show where it's going off the rails. So stick around for the plugs because we also might have something interesting to say in here too. Yeah, I stopped watching Survivor after like season 4 or 5. And I was like, oh, this is fake. And I realized, I was like, oh, reality TV is fake. When one of the contestants proposed to the other contestant, I'm like, nah, this is poppycock. But my parents still watch it. And I think they kicked Jeff Kent off pretty quickly because you win $1 million and Jeff Kent doesn't need the money. And so right away, they're all like, I think they ganged up and were like, yeah, dude, wait a minute. You look familiar. If you're not a baseball player, you're Carrie Elways from Princess Bride. So you know what? We got to get rid of you either way.
Oh, man. Well, Patrick, it has been an absolute delight to have you on the show this afternoon. Anything you want to plug, social media, projects you're working on?
Yeah, justbaseball.com. Do have an article coming out about the conversation I had with Barry Larkin about the Orlando Dreamers, the Rockies Insider channel on YouTube. Just to hit 400 podcasts, 400 shows for the Rockies Insider podcast. So that was fun. Nice little accomplishment. So check me out on social media, Blue Sky, X, TikTok, you name it, at Patrick D. Lyons or at Patrick D. Lyons MLB.
Awesome. Make sure you check all those out. I'll be looking forward to that Barry Larkin article. You can find me on Blue Sky at evanlang27.bsky.social. I'd love to hear from you. Catch me over on www.purplerow.com with your Monday Rock Piles and other Colorado Rockies news and content. Remember that you can find Rocky Mountain Rooftop on all of your favorite podcasting platforms of choice: Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio. If it's got podcasts, we are probably on it. You can also catch the video version of the show. See Patrick's cool framed baseball card collage behind him on the video version over on youtube.com.
It's an uncut sheet of cars, not a collage. Uncut sheet of 1987 tops.
That is even cooler, honestly.
And Bud Black is on the top row, by the way.
Was he still with the Royals in 87?
Yes. Yeah.
Remember that you can find Rocky Mountain Rooftop on all of your favorite social media platforms, especially Blue Sky, at Rocky Mountain Rooftop. That's at ROCKY MTN Rooftop. Patrick, as always, absolute pleasure to have you on the show. We appreciate your knowledge and insight. Thank you so much for joining us. For everybody listening, make sure you check out his stuff, Rockies Insider and Just Baseball. Check him out on social media. But for now, I think that is going to do it for this week. We're going to go ahead and wrap things up. Potentially an episode next week. Have not decided yet. It's Christmas this coming week, so we're still trying to figure out if we're going to do anything. If we do, great. If not, we'll see you the week after, but we will keep hitting you with the Rockies content here on Rocky Mountain Rooftop. Thank you so much for listening. Patrick, how about you hit him with it? We'll get on out of here.
Farewell.
Thank you.
This has been Affected by Altitude, a Colorado Rockies podcast with Rocky Mountain Rooftop, a proud affiliate of the Fans First Sports Network. Catch new episodes every Monday on wherever you get your favorite podcasts. Be sure to follow us on YouTube as well for video versions of the show.